Hey everyone, today I have a sketchbook tour video for you. So in this sketchbook are sketches that I have drawn on location as well as sketches that were drawn with the help of reference photos. This is a custom-made sketchbook with hardcover and it's filled with 100% cotton 300 GSM watercolor paper. The paper is Fabriano Artistico. And this sketchbook is was made by the Society of Physical Disabled here in Singapore. So I passed them the Fabriano Artistico paper and they cut the paper and bind it into the book. The construction is fantastic. The binding is excellent. And they use this canvas cover which is very durable. So this sketchbook was started in 2019. So this sketchbook is about 3 to 4 years old and I've just filled the last spread, which is why I can make this sketchbook tour video now. So this first sketch was drawn in Chinatown and from what I can see it's probably drawn on location. I can't really remember how I felt when I was drawing this, probably because I drew this a bit too fast. Anyway, there is this shop that is selling tourist souvenirs and this shop, if I remember correctly, has been converted into a restaurant because during the COVID period, many of these tourist shops, they are just not able to make any business, so many of them were actually converted to restaurants. So this was drawn on August 29, 2019. This was drawn on location. I remember this very vividly because I was sketching with my friends and there was a tour at this building which used to be a school but it's now a heritage center for the Ministry of Education, Singapore. And I actually made a video for this, a sketch walk video for this, which I hope I will remember to link in the video description below, but if I don't, please remind me. These are just some random sketches. This one I believe was created for a tutorial. Actually, many of the sketches in this book were created for tutorials that I have made for my patrons as well as on Skillshare. So for this particular sketch, I believed I used Sumi ink, textured Sumi ink and watercolor, which is just one color, and white gel pen. I actually like the effect here. More specifically, I like the shapes. This is a panorama sketch of Hanoi, not drawn on location. This was drawn with the help of a reference photo. And for this sketch, I used very thin lines. So if you compare this sketch with this sketch, for example, the lines here are much thicker, but for this sketch, the lines are much thinner. I personally like to use thicker lines, but there are some artists who prefer to use thinner lines, and the look and feel of thinner lines versus thicker lines is very different. But when the lines become too thick, they become a shape by themselves. This was also drawn with thin lines. Notice the texture here. Watercolor paper can deteriorate with time, so here in Singapore it's very humid and as a result the water can be absorbed by paper, and when that happens the sizing will be affected. The sizing is the process where gelatin is sized into or onto the paper so that the paper can handle water and water medium. If the paper is not sized and you paint with watercolor, the water will just soak through. So that's the reason why watercolor paper is watercolor paper. And because the sizing has deteriorated for this paper, that's why you see all these weird textures here. Fabriano Artistico watercolor paper is quite expensive, so to see the paper deteriorate and to see the texture here is quite quite disappointing. But that's the problem that I have when I custom made too many sketchbooks That's the problem that I have when I custom made too many sketchbooks that I am unable to fill fast enough. This was sketched on location and this was incredibly difficult to sketch, mostly because this building, which is the Art Science Museum, has is this very weird shape. The shape is very organic, so there is no perspective that you can rely on, so you really have to draw what you see based on observation. And I had to draw this like really quickly, so I made a lot of mistakes, so that's why this sketch looks kind of weird. I remember while I was drawing this, while I was leaving the scene, I saw another sketcher who was seated by the water lily pond here. So I remember that specific experience of meeting that sketcher. I believe I made a YouTube video for this as well, if I remember correctly. Again, I will try to link and I'll find that video and link it in the video description below if I can. This was drawn at Emerald Hill in the Orchard Road area. This sketch looks alright, the colors look a bit weird. This was drawn with the help of a reference photo, and this sketch looks kind of incomplete, probably because of there is a lot of detail here, but the sides are not very detailed, and the colors look a bit weird. This was drawn with very thin lines and with the help of a reference photo. The paint is Renaissance Intense. So when the paper quality deteriorates, which I'm pretty sure is the case here, the pigment will go into the paper. You only get vibrant colors when the paint is on the paper, on the surface of the paper, because when light reflects the paper, the light bounces off the paper, goes through the pigments that are on the paper. That's where you can see very vibrant colors. But if the pigment or the paint is inside the paper, when the light reflects off the paper, the light doesn't go through the pigments which are not on the surface of the paper. That's where the colors will appear dull. And that's the case here. Here the colors are more vibrant. This was drawn with the help of a reference photo, and I really like this sketch because there is it's a good use of values. There is light versus the much darker area, so there is good contrast. Here's a closer look. The ink that I use is waterproof ink in a fountain pen, if I remember correctly. If you want to draw on cold press watercolor paper, it's best to use a pen that has a metal tip so that the pen tip will not be worn out by the roughness or the texture of the paper. This sketch was drawn with a fude nib, which is a bent nib, if I remember correctly, because the lines here are a bit too thick, like way too thick for a typical fountain pen. And I like this sketch as well because, again, there is good contrast and the colors are very vibrant, and there is a good amount of granulation and texture. So I like this sketch very much. This was created for a tutorial, if I remember correctly. By the way, you can check out all those tutorials and online courses that I have on Skillshare or on my Patreon page. This was drawn on location, so I was at this skateboard shop to sketch. Why was I there? Was I there to buy a skateboard or was I there to sketch? I can't really remember. Yeah, I can't really remember. Anyway, I was standing here just beside the counter to draw this scene. So this shop is called Longboard Love, and the guy is from Scotland, if I remember correctly. So he is selling skateboards here in Singapore. And there are so many skateboards here, so many skateboard wheels. He would just fix up the skateboards or repair the skateboards. Or if you want to buy pre-made skateboards, there are many there. I'm still using my skateboard, although not as fast. Electric skateboards have been permanently banned here in Singapore, unfortunately. So I'm back to using the wooden skateboards. I love that sketch. I love all the sketches that I draw on location. These two sketches were drawn with the help of reference photos, if I remember correctly. They look alright. These two were also drawn with the help of reference photos. And I like the vibrant colors and the strong contrast. These are night scenes, and if I remember correctly, the scenes are from Tokyo. And the colors here look more vibrant because the paper is working fine. It's not deteriorated. So on paper that has deteriorated, I actually have to paint some treatment over it to make sure that the paper can handle water again. These are some very quick sketches, framed sketches. I remember the paint that I use here. It's M. Graham paint. I'm not sure why I remember that, but I just remember that. This sketch was drawn with the help of a reference photo, but halfway my sketch, like, I made some observational errors and I just drew everything else from imagination. So maybe a small portion of the sketch is based on reference photo, but the rest are actually just based on imagination. I use Kramer pigment paints here. So Kramer pigment paints are known for their granulation. Kramer pigments actually make a lot of pigments that are used to make watercolor products. So here I've used Cobalt Blue Dark PB74, one of my favorite colors. Cobalt Blue Light PB35, Cobalt Blue Turquoise Light PB28. If you want granulation, if you want a lot of granulation, definitely consider getting Kramer Pigments watercolor. This is Cobalt Blue Deep. It's very satisfying to paint with this color. Cobalt Blue Deep, by the way, is also available from other companies as well, such as Schminker and some other companies. This sketch was painted with the help of a reference photo. I think it looks alright. I probably drew this with a full-day nib, although I can't remember exactly, because the lines, they are not uniform. You can see some thicker lines and thinner lines. So here there are thinner lines, but you also see thicker lines here, and you can see some much thicker lines that look like ink blobs. And all these thick and thin lines and ink blobs make the sketch look more lively. I also have white gel pen on top of the watercolor. So I use white gel pen quite frequently to add details and highlights. These are the colors that I've used for this particular sketch. Oh, I actually use PY40, that's Aeroline or Cobalt Yellow, and Cobalt Blue, and Rose Madder Permanent. Oh, okay. So depending on the primary colors you use, there will be a limitation to the colors that you can make. So for this particular example, you can see these three colors actually don't have very high tinting strength. So if you want to mix like a black, like a really dark color, it's going to be very difficult. And if you really want to mix a dark color, you may have to use a lot of paint. You are going to waste a lot of paint. So it's best to mix darker colors with the correct primary colors so that you don't have to use that much paint. For example, if I use a warm red with a bit of phthalo blue, I can get something that's close to black. As compared to mixing black with these three colors, I will have to use like a lot of paint. And even if I use a lot of paint, I won't be able to get blacks that look like this. This is a mixed media sketch based on a reference photo. It looks a bit messy. Actually, I can't really tell what's going on. Anyway, I don't draw with mixed media that often, so it's difficult for me to find the right combination of tools and the techniques to make the sketch look great. So here I'm still experimenting. There are, however, fantastic mixed media artists out there, especially some of the Spanish urban sketchers. They are really great. This was drawn from a reference photo. It's a pen, ink, and watercolor sketch without much details. I use a mix of contour line drawing techniques and some other techniques. So you can see here I did not draw the outline for the shirt. I just drew some of the outlines but not the interior lines, and have the colors blend together to suggest the shapes. And for the legs as well, there are no outlines, just some splashes of color to suggest details. And for this guy here, I didn't even draw his legs, and this lady here as well, no face and no legs. So you don't really need to draw all the details to give the idea of the scene. You just need to draw the essential details, not all the details. This is a huge blank space here. Maybe I will fill it with some other sketch in the future, maybe not. This is the last sketch in this sketchbook, which I drew today, October 27, 2022. This was drawn with the help of a reference photo. And these are the colors that I have used. This is a mixed media sketch with pen, ink, and watercolor, and color pencils and crayons. Now that I look at this sketch, I think it's lacking some contrast. More specifically, some of the areas here should be darker, like black, like something like this, much darker. So this sketch lacks a bit of contrast. Using mixed media, also should I say this, mixed media works best on smooth hot press paper versus cold press textured paper. Because when you're using color pencils or crayons on the paper, you can still see a lot of the white of the paper. So if you want to cover the paper completely, hot press smooth paper is the way to go. I can see some paper texture problems again here because this paper is so old. So this is the sketchbook that took me 3 years to fill. I was using this sketchbook together with other sketchbooks at the same time, so I actually started this sketchbook with the intention of just filling this sketchbook with urban sketches, sketches that were drawn on location, but I realized that I wasn't going out that often. So I decided to just add some sketches that were drawn from reference photos as well, and also sketches that were drawn for my patrons and for the Skillshare courses. Before you go, I just want to let you know that if you want to learn more about pen, ink, and watercolor sketching, you can check out the many free tutorials that I have on my YouTube channel, or consider supporting me on Patreon to get access to even more full-length sketching and drawing tutorials. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next video. Bye.